Hey everyone, welcome to another Webflow workshop. I'm your host Nelson. Thank you for joining me this week. This is our last stream for the year 2017. And it's been a big year for Webflow. And what we do twice a year is we get a live Q&A session. Hey everyone, welcome to another Webflow workshop. Hold on. Whoops, I left myself on. Okay, there we go. So yeah, we're going to you'll be able to ask questions to our CEO Vlad right on the stream, and he'll answer you live. And there's a lot of things that happened in 2017, and still a lot of stuff that's going to happen for the year 2018. And I just want you guys to hear it straight from him. And yeah, so without further ado, let me get Vlad on the stream. Vlad, what is up?
Hey, not much. Just winding down for the year here, and super excited to talk to the community and just kind of recap the year and look forward to 2018.
Nice, nice. So, like I said, if you guys have questions for Vlad, please post it in the live chat room right now, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. And while we're waiting for those questions, Vlad, what do you think is the team's biggest accomplishment for the year 2017?
Ooh, good question. So there's been a lot. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that might not be visible. And in 2017, we did a lot of groundwork to prepare for a ton of features and platform improvements that are just going to be rolling off the presses in 2018. And you've already seen some of it with site search landing in beta a few weeks ago. But there's been so much work, so much groundwork to completely gut and not rebuild from scratch, but build like these foundations to make a plugin ecosystem possible in the future, and some big platform improvements that we'll be working on in 2018. And that, even though it might not be visible because we're not launching those things, is probably the biggest accomplishment in 2017. Not to mention some of the things that that we released, like Interactions 2.0 and site search, and there was like a big Webflow experts launch that we had, and global swatches, and I think we had like PDF file uploads that a lot of people were asking for, and Webflow University went live, and we did, as I mentioned, all this like tech debt elimination, where we just really modernized our stack and prepared it for future features. But the overall like big theme for our team internally is like we're really getting the pumps primed, so to say, to get a lot of stuff out for our community and our user base in 2018.
Yeah, so I guess that's one of the things that I said in past workshops, is that we were laying out a new foundation, and I think that was the canvas thing that you announced on the forums.
There were a couple, yeah. So on the forums, we announced this thing called Canvas Next. That was a part of it. There was also an unexpected. There's a lot of work around that, work that needed to be done that took longer than expected, which is not very uncommon in software development because it's not very predictable. But there's that was like the Canvas Next project was a huge undertaking that we wrapped up by the end of September, I believe. But then there were a lot of like follow-on things that built on that foundation to like further make some new things possible. So for example, site search built on top of Canvas Next and like the React-based rewrite that we did, and that really set the stage to deliver site search faster. Even though we could have started working on it, 6 months before, it probably would have taken this a similar amount of time. And probably wouldn't have been like to the level that we wanted to have that experience feel just like our CMS, for example. And Canvas Next really made that possible. So yeah, I know that sounds kind of like we're always building the foundation, but like 2017 was really all about that. And now as we go into planning our first quarter for 2018, very little of the work that we're actually doing on the ground is related to like this underlying refactoring or whatever. Almost everything that we're working on is going to be directly, things that people are asking for and things that are going to benefit the community at large. So, and they're going to be a lot more visible than the work that we were doing in 2017.
Nice, nice. Yeah, so I guess 2017 was all about making sure that the foundation is rock solid for the next year. And I think you can already tell because we had two big launches. You mentioned Interactions 2, and right after that, was it like a month or not even a month after, Site Search?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you see that cadence, I guess it goes to my next question. Your expectations for 2018, I'm guessing, is a faster cadence of releases, visible releases.
Absolutely, that's what we're shooting for. Because 90% of like 90% of the work we were doing in 2017 were in this category of like infrastructure improvements. And you can think of it kind of, I don't know. Let's say you have a BMW, like a gas engine powered car, and you're trying to convert it to an electric car as it's driving on the freeway. That's what makes it really, really hard. Like it's easier to start with, the goal of building an electric car from scratch, and you can get it to market faster. But when you first built like a gas car and you have to change out like not every moving part, but a lot of the sort of the engine as the car is running, that makes it a much bigger challenge. So that was 2017, but 90% of our work in 2018 is all feature related. It's actually like already shifted in that direction in this last quarter. We're just going to see the fruits of that, like really be visible in like first few quarters of 2018 and through 20. So like our big goal in 2018 is to become the all-in-one web design platform where all the use cases that you would expect from a web design platform, we would have. I can't say exactly what those are going to be. You can maybe connect the dots, but that's our goal for 2018, to really release these core features that will make it easier to sell Webflow to your clients, make it a much more obvious solution for everything that you might need to do in web design, not just some parts like a blog or a landing page or something like that. So that's where we really want to see 2018 go, where by the end of 2018, it's going to become very obvious that Webflow is the platform of the future for web design, and maybe even beyond that. Maybe beyond just web design, maybe into web applications, et cetera. We'll start to see some of those things materialize. So 2018 is going to be, we're really excited about that. I mean, we made a bunch of strides in 2017. Like we doubled pretty much everything. Like we're now serving something like 5 billion page views per month, which is pretty, it's compared to a year ago, it wasn't even close. It's something like 20 million requests a day, where before it was a third of that. And just the amount of trust people are putting into our like hosted platform, and the amount of hosted sites, custom domains, that's really been moving in a direction where people are really showing that that Webflow is meeting their customers' needs. And in 2018, we want to see that explode even more, where there's a lot more of the common use cases that you might expect on a website that we support, and kind of getting rid of any objections why you wouldn't want to use Webflow.
Yeah, a lot of big things for 2018. Okay, so we have a lot of questions in the live chat room. And yeah, I got 3 so far from the forum. So let's start with those because they chimed in the earliest. P.A. Sint, I think that's his name. Is Webflow working on a way to accelerate development process internally or by allowing third-party integrations? And I think you've already touched on this a little bit, but I don't know if you want to add anything for this question.
Sure. So our current plan to allow for third-party extensions and what we call plugins is kind of, it's not even twofold, it's like fivefold. So we have a strategy to make that available in the market. So the first thing we're doing is actually building all of our existing features in addition. So we have kind of three big pillars that we want to focus on in 2018. One is add a lot more building blocks. So building blocks are things that that we already have in Webflow, let's say slider, nav bar, et cetera, and adding a lot more of those, a lot of the most common ones that you might see on other sites, like let's say a gallery component or something like that.
Yeah.
So one is adding a lot more of these building blocks. The other one is adding more use cases, so things like site search, password protected sites, et cetera. And then the last one is much more natural.
Oh. Did my internet drop?
Easy to use model so that it, am I breaking up?
I think it was me. Okay, we're back on. Go ahead.
Gotcha. So again, to recap, one is more building blocks, then more use cases, like very common use cases. And then the last one is a much easier layout model and making our design tools a lot easier to use. So one example of that is like a grid layout module or something like that. And so our approach with extensions is to first build as many of these internal things that we're getting out into Webflow proper in this sort of extension model that we want to eventually open up to other developers. So, and the reason for doing that is we want to validate that API, right now it's internal, but that API can like scale to many different types of things that you might want to create in Webflow, and just kind of like make sure that is, we don't just open up a Webflow to where it now introduces a bunch of plugins that can really break sites and are not properly versioned or not properly supported. We want to like really validate that API through features that we're building, but we're building them in a way that is moving closer and closer to this plugin and extension model. And once we're comfortable with that, then we'd open it up to more developers and eventually open it up completely so that anybody can use that API to add new functionality to Webflow. Unfortunately, there are no timelines there. We're just trying to move to that as quickly as possible. But that is the long-term intention for us to make Webflow more of a platform that is has an ecosystem around it versus just things that we deliver from our company and like HTML embeds and simple things like that.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense because it segues to our next question from Stu. He's wondering about the status on Crosssite copy-paste, and he's asking, what's the current plan and how will the implementation work?
Sure. So I can't share too many details on the actual implementation. I can share that we are planning to have at least a user, like an internal or a small beta test of that feature in January. So that's something that we're like feverishly working towards. Like we've actually been working on it for the last 3 months, I believe. So we have a team like really focused on that part of the app because it's our #1 requested feature on the wish list. And it's something that we desperately want ourselves because we have a lot of different sites that we don't want to redo the workaround. I think initially there's going to be some limitations around like merging of. So let's say you had a site A that has like a bunch of classes and styles, and then you copy a section into site B that might have some conflicting names. So you might have a class name section in both projects. Like there, I think the first version is going to kind of play it safe and rename what you pasted into like section 2, so there's no collisions, and then you can manually go in and decide which parts of the nodes and the classes you want to keep. But we are aiming for kind of a seamless experience where, for example, if you copy paste something that has assets or images or PDFs or whatever, then when you paste it into the new project, it kind of seamlessly does that, like copies those assets, it essentially duplicates them into the new project. As long as you own both projects, we're not quite sure exactly how we're going to roll it out to like just read-only links. Initially, you're going to have control of both projects, so you'll have like write control to both projects before you can actually grab that data and move it over. Because there's a bunch of concerns around, whether you can like take other people's images that you don't have a license for, fonts and things like that. So the initial version is going to, I think for most people, is going to solve like the major use case of like not having to rework a bunch of do a bunch of work over when you start a new project. You won't have to like duplicate an entire site and delete a bunch of stuff just to get like a pricing section that you already built out that you're really happy with, or some section, or even create like a style guide or library project that you can sort of like drag stuff or copy paste stuff from to save a bunch of time. So that's one that I'm personally excited about. There's another feature we're working on that I unfortunately can't share too much about, that will make something like cross-site copy paste even more exciting, kind of around design systems, but we'll have more detail to share about that next year. Okay. But cross-site copy paste is definitely it's a top priority for us. It's in the top 3, and we're shooting to get it to everyone early next year, so January.
Yeah, and I know our designers, at least Ryan, our lead brand designer, is going to be super happy about that, because every time we make a small little change to the brand design, he has to go through every marketing page that we've built inside of Webflow and make sure that they're all the same. Yeah. And so having some sort of master project to push changes down real easily, oh man, it's going to save so many people so much time.
So just to set expectations, like cross-site copy paste will not have that live. You'll be able to copy paste changes that you make from one project to another. But it won't have like this live style guide type of system. That's the thing that I kind of alluded to, that we're kind of in the research and prototyping phase of right now, to really solve that problem well, where you have a central style guide that once you change it, you can actually like have that trickle down to every part of your other projects that use those components. But that's a much more involved project that we're still in the research and sort of validation phase of.
Okay, all right. Next one from Vincent on the forums. Status on pagination. This is a big one that a lot of people have been talking about ever since CMS, Webflow CMS was launched. Any status on that or file attachments in the CMS editor?
Good questions. So pagination, we did make a bunch of progress on like the underpinnings of what would make it easier. And we're planning to work on it as a requirement for another project that just really requires pagination. So it's on the radar. It's not in active development, but it's something that is, I would say it's safe to assume that it should be coming in 2018. That's something that is a very core use case, and we've already built all the underlying kind of infrastructure to make it easier, and it's definitely kind of high on the list on our backlog. There's some limitations there to where like our initial pagination model might not cover all the different use cases that you might see in a pagination module and say like WordPress or something like that. But it'll be enough to really solve the basic use cases there.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, the other question was,
the file attachments in CMS editor, because we already have a way to upload PDFs.
Right. I don't have any insight into that specifically. I think it's planned, but I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to check.
Okay. All right. And now, so those are the ones from the forums, and a lot in the chat room. Let me start with the easy one for you. Okay. Brendan Laird is asking, is Vlad the Elon Musk of web design?
uh,
I'm kidding.
Funny. I think I'd have to build a rocket or something for that to be the case, or start like a underground drilling company. I don't know.
All right. All right.
The answer is no. The answer is no.
All right. All
Although
right.
I don't know if there are any of the other contenders for that role.
All right. Jason Rose is asking, with all these new features being released, more and more on the way, are there any plans to redesign the designer UI to accommodate? I worry it might become overwhelming for some novice users.
Mm-hmm. Well, good question. So we have a couple initiatives there. Like one is we've actually started an internal education team, like a full-time education team. Before it was it was something that we contracted out, and it was something we sort of did on and off when we had new features launched. So there's going to be a lot of improvements in terms of like first-time use and how we train people to use the designer. We don't have immediate plans to completely change the UI like we did a few years ago, because that can be, and one of the reasons we did it a few years ago was to prepare for some of these big features that could be coming up in the next few years. I don't anticipate there being a huge change in the designer UI, especially since it's very disruptive in terms of like tutorials that have been created by ourselves, the community, documentation. Just like muscle memory of working with Webflow. We haven't seen like a huge need to completely rethink the UI, even though sometimes we're tempted to, just from like a visual perspective, to add like theming and give certain folks like a light theme or something like that.
Yeah.
But that is pretty low on the priority list, honestly, compared to the three things that I mentioned, which is like more building blocks, a lot more use cases that solve real problems for you and your clients and your businesses, and then much easier layout. Because like right now, we realize when somebody's a novice coming into web design, layout is one of those things that is really, really hard, especially if you're dealing with like floats and inline block, and it's even Flexbox can become very overwhelming. So we're trying to make strides on those fronts versus kind of rejiggering our UI, because that could be both like a positive and a negative, right? We might make a little bit more progress in how things are laid out, but we might kind of go backwards in what people are used to, and sort of going back on some productivity. I don't know, things people are used to.
Yeah.
We don't want to slow folks down for just aesthetic reasons, let's just say.
Yeah.
But the current things we have on the roadmap for 2018 are definitely, for the most part, fit our existing UI. Although we might have quite a few changes for the editor, which is what the clients see, to make that easier to use and provide a better user experience there. But that's to make it more powerful, not to while still being easy to use.
Yeah, and I think the Webflow University, now that we have a education team set, is just gonna make it easier and easier for people to just look up certain features on Webflow and to see how to do it. And plus, it shows that the left toolbar is growing, because once we added site search beta. You added a new cog on the left side, which seems like it's gonna have more settings for a lot of other things. So I think it's the design UI is ready for the future, and I think Webflow University helps with that.
Yep, and that's not to say that there aren't like major usability improvements we can make in the UI. We're always considering those. But we also have to be mindful of like Webflow is a very professional tool, and our aim is to really empower web designers that don't want to code to be able to do the same kind of super powerful stuff that they would be able to do if they were coding. So there's a certain level of like learning curve that is going to be there no matter what. And that's why we really have to be strong on education and like first use experience and tutorials and kind of resources we provide for people to learn, while still trying to make it like the first time that you use it, whether you're a web designer, a graphic designer, print designer, or even like a business owner or a startup owner that just wants to have a lot more control than like Squarespace or a WordPress theme might give you. You are able to figure it out. So it's sort of I don't want to say that our designer layout and UI is perfect. There's always improvements to be made there.
Yep. All right. Carlene is asking about internships. Will there be an internship available for the coming year, specifically in New York or remotely?
We've done a few internships. I think we've done 3 or 4 in the last 4 summers. They've always been on site in San Francisco just because there's just, even though only a minority of our team is here, I think we're over 60% remote now. For something like an internship, it really has been helpful to have folks here on site. And we're actually starting one right now with somebody from abroad that's traveling here and living here for a while. But yeah, we don't have an established internship program. We're always open to considering people who want to learn. But it's usually a one at a time kind of thing. Just the size of the company that we are and the amount of time we can dedicate to training folks and kind of providing feedback and things like that. Usually it's pretty, we're not at a big enough stage right now where we can do several at a time.
Okay. All right. This is a good one right here from Eric asking, he said, we moved away from WordPress because many mission critical plugins broke during the WordPress updates. Yep. Is Webflow concerned about having the same problem with upcoming third-party plugins?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we're taking it slow and actually developing plugins internally to create a very clear versioning model. So one of the things about Webflow is that we want the user experience to win out over potential, like ultimate flexibility of a developer, let's just say, because it leads to problems like that we've seen with WordPress. We like a model where, for example, there have been, I would say, like on the order of hundreds of bugs with Webflow plugins, like the nav bar, slider, etc., over the last 4 years since we started developing them internally. And then every single time we have because it's kind of, we deal with it at a central level, you can actually fix that bug and it goes live everywhere. So the second that you discover that, whether it's a bug or some sort of browser incompatibility with a new browser coming out, like it instantly gets fixed for everyone. That's not true for something like WordPress, where you really have to work. I mean, there's some WordPress installations that I worked on that are like WordPress 2.0 that are probably, out of touch with those businesses, and those businesses no longer have a tech team. And they might be severely out of date with a bunch of plugins. And that's never the case with Webflow. Like, we want to make sure that the plugins that we do have are really well supported. So it's not just like, we'd rather have 100 great plugins that are well supported than 1,000 from like random developers that might develop something over a weekend and then just drop it and put it in a marketplace or something like that could actually damage not only our customers by way of kind of like infecting their sites, but actually their visitors too. Because like one of the most common malware vectors is to find a broken website, embed some code there and have that run forever, like whether it's mining Bitcoin or just like collecting user information or whatever it is. And that's not something we want to tolerate at all. So we are, that's a problem for another day for us. Like we want to make sure that we follow a little bit more of the Apple model where there is a review process for developers. There's a code review to make sure that plugins are rock solid. There's a support plan to make sure that if there's a problem with a plugin, there's like a way to disable a plugin if we determine that there's some sort of risk and developer's not around to fix it. But those are things that we're going to define more and more as we actually bring that into something that's publicly available. But for now, one of the main reasons why we're keeping it kind of close to our chest is to like flesh that out, to make sure the API is strong and resilient as new bugs come up, as new browser requirements come in, as like the web platform evolves, and as the web platform grows. And once we're comfortable with that, that's only then would we release something into the wild.
Nice. Yeah. Simply put, quality over quantity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, all right, next one. I like this one. Riley is asking, any future Webflow conference in the making?
Oh, I hope so.
I would love this too.
Yeah, so that is the ideal. So we actually just hired a head of community. You might be seeing more and more of her. Her name is Anais. She just recently joined our team maybe 2 weeks ago. So we're going to really be ramping up our community outreach efforts, and we're probably going to start small with more meetups, more things that are not a one time a year and let's hope a conference really takes off kind of thing. But once we develop the community more and more, then we'll be a lot more comfortable with doing a full-on conference. But that's a dream here. Like it would be great for us to kind of show off what we've been working on, but also just inspire a ton of people and show off what other people in the community have been building in Webflow and share best practices and really take our company and community to the next level. And the conference is a great way to do that. So if that's certainly something we're shooting for. We just don't want to kind of put the cart before the horse, and we want to take it one step at a time before we ramp up to something that big.
Okay, yeah. Arthur is asking, Asset Manager, are you planning to expand the function of the Asset Manager, like the ability to make folders or have a batch select?
There are plans to do that. They're not super immediate, to be honest. There are a lot of things that we're preparing for some big features that are sort of at the core level. So for example, like an image set field in the CMS, that's the ability to upload multiple images. And tying in the editor and the designer, the CMS part with the asset manager, because right now they're kind of like separated. We want to cover those basics first before really thinking through the user experience for the asset manager. We actually have a bunch of designs already for like a kind of revamped asset manager, but we're really taking it kind of one big problem at a time, and we see that with the sort of these foundational pieces of making sure assets are just thought of as like this shared thing that even, you can open up some assets to your clients in the editor to be able to pull it into a blog post or something like that without having to re-upload those things. So that is first, and then we'll be thinking through things like folders and tagging, et cetera, inside of the asset manager UI.
All right. This one, I think it's been come up a lot in the community. CMS with components, so like Lightbox, sliders, and
oh, you mean like rich text fields with components inside?
I guess that's one of them. But like for instance, if you want to have bring in a collection list, but that collection list works with the sliders. So you don't have to kind of custom
Oh,
code?
I think that's two separate things. So one is CMS bound sliders, which
Yeah.
we definitely want to get done soon. That's the same thing goes with lightboxes. So that's definitely part of the foundation that we've been preparing for. Then there's the ability in rich content fields in the CMS to embed something more complicated than like a paragraph and a link in a list, right? Like, or an image. So we definitely are working towards. We actually have the major part of the foundation already built to be able to treat those what we call nodes internally as pretty much like a normal type of node. So you'd be able to, let's say, drop in a slider into a blog post as one example. That's something we're moving towards. There's no timing there yet. There's just like some stuff isn't clear yet. That's part of the 10% that we're still doing in 2018 to prepare for that foundation. Just that's still lingering from the work that we did last year or this year. But that's certainly the intent for these boundaries to sort of disappear between like what you can do in the CMS. So just like the asset manager thing I mentioned, you shouldn't have to think of a asset as something different between the designer and the editor and the CMS, right? Like right now in one enhancement that we'll be making, something as simple as on a page where you select the OG, like the open graph image, right? You have to like upload a URL or something like that. That should certainly be from the asset manager. So there's like that integration. For various legacy reasons, we like to move faster. We implemented it kind of like in a way that didn't require all this like underlying work to be done. But our intention is to like remove those boundaries in how like your mental model thinks around like assets and content between CMS and something on the canvas, to where it all becomes like something in the CMS. If you have a rich text field, it just becomes like a mini canvas, right? So you have much more control over what you do there. With some limitations, of course, like we want to make sure that designers can do like pro designers can do a certain level of styling and sort of customization there. But for content editors on kind of the business side, we definitely want to make sure that there's some limitations there, so you don't like mess up the layout or mess up the site or add like custom code there. So there's kind of like a trade-off, but we definitely want to move in the direction where it all starts to feel kind of like a one cohesive, integrated environment between the designer, the editor, the CMS, in like future platform improvements.
Okay. Let's see here. We have 20 minutes left, so a couple more questions. And if I don't get to your question, just ask it on the forums, and we'll get to it if we can. There's a lot of people asking questions, and I doubt we're gonna get to all of them. But yes, thank you everyone who's in the live chat room asking these questions. It just seems like a lot of stuff that's gonna come for 2018. Okay, Crusader Digital, your question: mobile CMS access for editors, and I think we've touched on that in the previous Q&A with you, and it was on our previous commercial.
Yeah. It's always we're learning our lessons on what to put into forward-looking videos. So that's certainly something. So right now we have a project called Editor Next, is the code name, to really sort of like the follow-up to Canvas Next and the designer, to make sure that the editor is now on like the newest foundation. And after that is when we'll be able to consider mobile support for iPads, etc. But it's probably still like in 2018, it probably isn't going to be like a mobile app. It's just going to be like a web app that's optimized for touch and for smaller screens. But again, I can't make any promises there, unfortunately. Like that's not something that's in active development now. But we are in active development for the cleanup phase there to get ready for something like that. And I see multilingual support being listed, being asked a bunch of times in the chat. That is certainly something we see as a foundational use case that all of our features over time need to support. And it's going to be a big priority in 2018. Unfortunately, no timelines. Again, that's something that I'm personally learning to set expectations correctly, because priorities change all the time, and engineering can take a much longer time than expected for good reasons. But multi-language support is definitely central to where we want the platform to go.
Nice. Yes, a lot of people have been asking that. Speaking of a lot of, let's see here. Let me look at the list.
There's also this question has come up so many times, like the ability to import code. That's something I think it might help to just answer why we're not actively working on something like that. And it's not for lack of trying. Like from year one, we saw that one of the biggest benefits to being able to start with Webflow is not having to rebuild your project from scratch. But once you actually start working on something like a full site import, it might work with a very small site with a very clear, well-written style sheet and a really clean HTML and almost no JavaScript or no JavaScript, to then taking just a simple WordPress I don't know, agency or portfolio site, or even a Squarespace site. And the quality of the code, the many different types of ways that people write CSS and HTML, it becomes completely untenable. Where what you end up pulling in doesn't look exactly like what the original site was, and it's a really tough technical challenge. Where when we do solve it, that'll be amazing. That's something that will be a huge win for a lot of people to get started faster. But it's something that's really, I'll give you one example. Webflow doesn't support certain types of selectors, like a star selector, or where every CSS element is selected, but most projects use that type of selector, and a bunch of hacks, CSS has this thing called important. And sometimes people will see some issue with their layout and they'll just add all these hacks to make it work the way that they want. But when you actually pull in that style sheet and try to parse it, it's really hard to understand what the structure behind that code was. So for us, it's just been something that we deliberately decided we'll keep trying to experiment with it on Hack Week projects and things like that. But it's something that every time we've tried, it has been a really big distraction, where we'd have to spend years on research and development to try to make something like that really happen and be reliable. And we think our time is much better spent building core features like site search and Interactions 2.0, et cetera. So that's just to say, probably don't expect something that has imports of full sites anytime soon. We do already do imports of structured CMS data, which via CSV import. But that's a lot easier, because that's content in a spreadsheet versus a blob of HTML and CSS. That's much harder to parse.
Totally understandable. Happy Penguin is asking, what would you say is the biggest challenge Webflow faces with the upcoming changes in 2018?
It's a good question. We feel really confident that we're taking the right steps and focusing on the right priorities, at least in how we're planning the first few quarters of 2018. There's definitely, it's on us, because we're growing as an organization. We're above 50 people now, and we have to learn how to scale our teams and the way we work, and because we're taking on much bigger problems. Whereas before, building something like a slider could be a one engineer job for 1 month. Now, if you're building something like site search, which includes many different moving parts, you have a backend indexing service, and then you have like front end components, and then you have all this user experience around how to design a what is like a collection list that looks
Nope. Uh-oh.
like.
Okay.
So anyway, to sum up there, I think our biggest challenge is, learning how to, or just keeping our cadence really fast and delivering the things that we want to deliver to our community. And that's more of a challenge. It's more of an exciting thing to tackle versus like something that like keeps me up at night or I'm really super worried about. But we're in a really good position going to 2018, both financially and as a team, and as a like the community that we're really fostering, and the amount of people that are entrusting their business to Webflow. It's really exciting what we'll be able to do in 2018. So I'm not too I'm like 99% excited and maybe 1% concerned about like what we can mess up. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so this one, let's see here. Oh, this is a good one. This has to do with net neutrality. How do you think? This is from Hans or Hans. How do you think the end of net neutrality will affect the future of web design?
Good question. It's pretty hard to answer. I mean, like in a nutshell, net neutrality really, the lack of net neutrality really benefits large players. The Amazons, the Netflixes, et cetera, because they can really afford to whatever the fee may happen to be to get access to like fast lanes of delivering content over the web. It really benefits them and hurts small players, which I would certainly put Webflow in, including all of our users and people who build sites with Webflow. I think the biggest risk is that, for example, if somebody creates something really popular on Webflow and then like, I don't know, Verizon doesn't like it because it causes too much traffic to go over the wire to whether it's YouTube or whatever. They might slow or throttle it, which would be terrible for kind of like treating small players differently from somebody who's able to pony up the cash to pay for a faster lane. But I'm a big believer in there's I forget who said this quote. Maybe it was Martin Luther King, but like, over time the arc of justice, or like time sort of biases towards justice. And I really believe that even though we might be in a weird time right now politically with just the way the government is run, where it's way more pro-business, I think we'll have just with this net neutrality decision going to the courts, and a lot of states like California, for example, putting in their own rules to counteract the decision that was made by the FCC. I'm really confident and optimistic that despite these attempts by Comcast, Verizon, et cetera, that they're going to have a really hard time actually trying to pull off the kinds of things that they wish they could. To essentially at the end of the day, try to make a lot more money off of giving people access to the internet. But I'm a big believer in sort of the goodness of people, and over time, us being able to reverse these decisions. So I'm more optimistic than not. And thank you to Andrew. I think he posted, "Let us realize the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." I totally butchered that, but
It's okay. It's okay. We knew what you meant. We knew what you meant. All right. So, let me put this is the last question. This is going to be the last question for you. And again, if
10 minutes.
Oh, you want to? Okay, I just wanted to see if you want to. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so this one's been asked a couple times. Offline mode.
Mm-hmm.
Genevieve and Jihan want to know if there's going to be offline mode.
Sure. Offline mode is really hard for simple reasons. if you limit Webflow to a specific subset of things that you're doing, let's say you're doing just a static design with inline SVGs or something like that, it's not too hard. But when you start to add things like image uploads or the ability to have certain plugins that load over the wire, like let's say a YouTube video or a Twitter badge or a Facebook badge or an Instagram embed that actually contributes to layout. So you need a constant internet connection in order to see what your design is actually going to look like. That's where it becomes really difficult because you have to create a way for us to like abstract away something. For example, we upload all of our images to like a secure area on Amazon, and it goes directly as you upload your video. So we have to find a way to like locally emulate that and sort of treat that as a staged upload while still having a bunch of stuff pre-cached to kind of take your project offline. So it's not something that we're actively looking into right now, honestly, just because there hasn't been a ton of demand, and it's also like overwhelmingly hard right now. And it would be helpful for us to have more use cases, kind of really well defined, that we really want the platform to solve before. So, like for example, if we were to build offline support right now, and then let's say multi-language support has some sort of reliance on a third-party API call or something like that to do translations, we really have to know that that's something that we need to solve for in offline mode versus, just kind of willy-nilly create an offline mode right now for the most basic of use cases, but then having all these like caveats and exemptions that, certain parts don't work when offline mode is enabled. So it's certainly something that we will consider more and more as time passes, especially as there's more demand for it. But at this point, like we see a lot more demand for like the actual use cases that solve more problems that you can see on our wish list. And I think offline mode is something that's more in the back burner right now. Okay. And not being actively looked at yet.
Totally makes sense. Okay, I like this one right here. Ilya is asking. Actually, no. Let's go to a fun one. Andrified. This should be quick. What is your favorite animal?
Wolf.
I know why. All right. Any thoughts on exporting CMS data easily? Because I know we already have the CMS API for developers, so developers.webflow.com.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, you can pull out all CMS data via the API, and that's totally free to use. We don't have immediate plans to make that part of the like the export experience because what we found is that if you export that data like as a CSV download or something like that, then people still have to do a ton of work to go import that into like get a developer, have that developer port that to WordPress or something like that. And at that point, it's much easier for that developer to just use the API, which is already available to do that same work. There are some ideas around like making that like a static site generator thing where, export would pull in the data and sort of like flatten all the pages. That's something we're experimenting with, but we have to like play around with what that actually would look like. In that case, it's for people who are doing that, it's the same thing. Like they can use the API and mix it with like a static site generator, like, Jekyll or what are some other ones, Gatsby, etc., where you already have to have a developer involved in order to do that. And at that point, we have like the best way for developers to port that content over, which becomes even more difficult with things like foreign key relations, which are things like multi-references on a detail page. You really have to think through like, okay, what happens when you change one of those CMS items? And we just at the end of the day, we fundamentally believe that we want Webflow to be like an all-in-one platform that is really easy for web designers to use, like from start to finish. So solving just like the design piece, and then leaving like all this pain around, after you export, you have to like upload to an FTP server and like set up hosting somewhere else. That just seems like like adding more and more pain to the process, and another thing for us to support. And that's the difficult thing. Like every time we add new features, like we have to support them in perpetuity. So we have to be really thoughtful in how far we go into supporting export use cases. So for example, from day one, people have been asking for, when you export a Webflow form, why doesn't that work, right? Because that requires like either a PHP server or a Node server, or it depends on what your host supports. There's just no possible way that Webflow could, like realistically, with the employees that we have, or with the team that we have, or even with double the size of the team, to support all the different types of ways that people choose to host their projects externally, especially if they make one-off changes to that code after it's exported. Yeah. And it just, like, even though it seems like a simple thing, like, hey, just make my form work, there's just no possible way that we can do that without like delivering maybe like a Docker container that has that completely working with like a PHP server and like a MySQL server to capture all the form submissions. Like at that point, it's just so much more straightforward for us to just say, look, our forms just work if you submit them and you publish them to Webflow hosting, because there's so much under the hood that needs to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Like the actual, it's not just hosting that you just throw up on an FTP server. There's an actual application server there. There's like email delivery for when form submissions come in. Now, for example, in 2018, there's a new regulation in Europe called GDPR around like user privacy and compliance. If we had supported user capture of form data on exported sites, then we'd be on the hook for like making sure that all of our users are compliant that have exported, and that puts the burden on our team that we can't, like, literally can't afford whether it's from a time perspective or from a financial perspective. We just can't afford to do that. And I think exporting CMS content in a similar degree kind of opens up that can of worms, like, because people might expect the same way that you export like a Interactions 2.0 landing page, that everything just works. I can just copy it to a server and it's just going to work. Yeah. But with CMS content, they're like a lot of times people might be surprised, just like with forms, like why doesn't it just work out of the box? Because there's just so many details there. Like why isn't, for example, once you support CMS export, why doesn't the editor work? Because the editor requires a database to understand when a user can log in. It needs to understand, like it has to have all of this hosted somewhere to like manage login sessions, manage arbitration between who's editing a blog post to lock it down before another person tries to make a conflicting edit. And then all this starts to kind of like the user experience starts to break down. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to trying to save a few dollars on hosting. For some use cases, and I think that's where it's much better for clients, like the overall user experience, to just have this seamless all-in-one. You just know it's going to work when everything is integrated with the design tool, the editor tool, and that's where we really have a lot of confidence in the value we provide in our like overall like go to production model, where it's not just the design that you make, it's like the full-on. You're creating an entire solution, not just for yourself, but to manage your entire web presence all in one place. And that's where we see ourselves moving more in the future, just because the export use cases are so difficult to reason about.
Yeah, making things easier. I mean, removing the burden off of us designers and our clients. So, yeah.
That's the idea, yeah.
All right, last two. Christian is asking, do you have any plans to market Webflow to the masses, like a Super Bowl ad in 2018?
Definitely yes, and by that I mean definitely no. Super Bowl ad in 2018 would probably take our entire bank balance. And I'm not sure for which benefit. So for right now, Webflow is definitely marketed more towards web design professionals. And more over time, like we'll probably start to see more businesses come directly to us. But we see this community of like web design experts as like the thing that makes everything tick. And the reason why we really build the product for web design professionals, not for like, there's certain parts of the platform, like our editor, where you manage content. People spend more and more time in that. A designer might spend 30 hours designing a project, but then the business that they design that project for might spend 30 hours a week managing content inside of the editor. So we really have to make sure that experience is rock solid, and we have to market that capability to potential businesses to be able to build their business on top of Webflow. But we also want to do it in a way that encourages sort of like the two sides to work together. So that's why we have the experts marketplace, where if a business comes in and they're like, oh, I really don't know how to figure out all this complex, layout stuff. That's when we send them to experts.webflow.com, where they can get a Webflow expert that's in the design community to create this project for them. But then they get the benefit of, managing content visually with the editor, and having everything in one place, etc. So over time, we might have more and more marketing towards like the mass market, but you're probably not going to hear a Webflow advertisement on the radio, or especially during the Super Bowl. Maybe the World Cup, but we'll see.
Okay. All right. Okay. This question, a couple people in the chat room are... Actually, a lot of people in the chat room, a lot of people in the forums are asking this one glaring question. Yeah. And it revolves e-commerce. So I'm saving that one for last.
I've never heard that request. Is that a popular one?
I think it's like somewhere low in the community wish list.
Right.
Yeah.
So it would be fair to say that we consider it a major use case. It's very I can't really say when we're going to start working on it, what the scope of that project is. It's definitely something that's on the radar for us. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was, something along that major theme in 2018 that, for lack of a better pun, that you should be able to check out. Yeah, it's certainly something that's very important. That's always been, we knew that it was very important on our ultimate roadmap. And we're considering it a lot more in recent history. So that's definitely in that second bucket of solving for major use cases. We just don't have any timelines or estimates or concrete ideas there. There's actually some advantages to because it's such a competitive space, with so many big players in that space for like decades now. We really want to be thoughtful in how we approach that problem, and consider a lot of different options, whether it's like integrating, whether it's building our own. And there's just a lot of decisions that need to be made there. But we hope to surprise this community with something awesome on that front at some point.
Okay. All right. So there you guys have it. Thank you so much, Vlad. I know these are a lot of questions and really, really good answers to what's ahead in 2018 for Webflow. Any final thoughts for the community, or anything you want to say to the community for the end of 2017?
I mean, I'm super proud of what our team was able to accomplish in 2017, even though it might not have been as visible as we wanted to be. We definitely want to become a lot more proactive and how transparent we're being about things that we're building or even not building. It's sometimes a relief to be able to say, like, look, we're not going to be working on. One example that I kind of see on the sidebar is user login based functionality. Like, I can pretty confidently say that in 2018, it's probably not something that you should rely on us building out, because we have much more kind of common use cases that we still need to build out for. sometimes it's a relief to be able to say that, and it's probably better for, it might be frustrating for some people who really want it to be like right around the corner, but it might be a relief for others to just not, spin their wheels to expect something that's not actually coming. So we definitely have a lot to work on in terms of creating more transparency and being more open with our community. It's something that we're working on. But the work that we did in the last year and how we've been able to build out our team to really hire some amazing people, in addition to the amazing people we already had. I'm super proud of where the company is right now, and just crazy excited about the what we have coming in 2018, just because it's like finally a lot of things are coming together where we'll be able to have a really good cadence of public announcements and feature launches, and just milestones. Like we've reached some big milestones in 2018. I think there's, Bryant announced in a recent article, we just reached a milestone of having a $10 million recurring revenue business, which means that we can invest so much more into the Webflow platform, which means that we're kind of on that border of profitability. We're not beholden to investors or somebody like to point us in the direction they want us to go in. Like we really rely on our team and our community and our user base to drive what we're making the platform to be. And that was a huge milestone in 2017, and that just sets us up for an even more successful 2018. But mostly I'm just excited about the product improvements that are coming in 2018. Like there's going to be some big surprises, and some things that hopefully are on the order or even beyond what we did with the CMS a few years ago, where a lot of people were expecting, some sort of like better WordPress integration. But what we shipped was like what I believe to be a revolutionary visual CMS that was kind of the first of its kind, and it's still pretty unrivaled in the market. So we hope to have some of those big types of launches in 2018, and it's super exciting to be having been doing this for 5 years now, being more excited than I was the previous year, when I was even more excited than the year before that. Usually you don't see that kind of thing where you get a lot of the excitement out in the first few years. But for us, the ocean of opportunity is only opening up. So 2018 is going to be a big stepping stone towards that. But it's only going to be like a tiny little blip when you think about Webflow 10 years from now. And Webflow 10 years from now could be like a complete transformation to the entire industry and how people create, not just websites, but software in general. And that's something that I'm super excited about. I think our team is really excited about it. And there's just like a lot of great things to come.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Vlad, for your time and answering these questions. Let's go 2018. Oh, man. And I'm so glad that I was just going to ask you that too. Like, how do you keep your excitement level up even after all these years? And yeah, dude, it's so much fun stuff ahead. So thank you again. And we'll see you in July or June for another Q&A. Yeah?
Awesome. And maybe we should do these like quarterly or something.
Okay, well,
as long as I don't promise anything.
Exactly. All right, well, thank you so much, Vlad.
You got it. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for hanging out.
See ya.
Take care. Bye.
Awesome. Oh, man. So, again, if you didn't get your question answered, go to the forums, forum.webflow.com, and post it there. We also have a wish list that's being updated more regularly. Go to wishlist.webflow.com. Thank you, everyone, for a great 2017. As you heard from Vlad, a lot of big things are going to happen in 2018. To summarize this stream, 2017 was all about building a foundation that's rock solid to make sure that the year after it's just going to be more time for fun. All right? So I'll see you next year. Let's do our regular, ending stuff. Okay. So if you have any account billing or technical issues, go to university.webflow.com/contact, and I and the rest of the support team will help you out as soon as we can. If you have any design or custom code questions, please join the community at forum.webflow.com and ask your question there. And if someone answers your question, please pass that favor forward and answer someone else's question so we can all grow and learn together. This stream happens every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We will be off next week for the holiday break, so the next time the stream happens will be next year. And yeah, if you want to follow us on social media, facebook.com/webflow, twitter.com/webflow app. You can follow me on Twitter at thepixelgeek. Instagram is Webflow app. Thank you guys so much. This has been fun. Have a great holiday break, and see you in an even better new year. As always, make the web beautiful.